urbanism as climate action, I can say that I was an environmental science major as an undergrad, and a lot of my tree hugging friends back in that time, like, immediately decamped to live in the forest. That's what they considered to be environmentalism, and I was always like, that's not environmentalism. Like, you're driving, you're car dependent, you're cutting down trees to live in the trees. So for me, like basically urbanism has always been the stronger form of climate action. Not that there's a one size fits all, but I believe in that strongly. So urban areas are at the center of both climate action and climate adaptation. And we've talked about both, and there's, we'll say focus on one or the other, but it's urbanism is at the center of both. And so focus on climate and urbanism is important on multiple levels. Firstly, urbanism as climate action. So when we talk about urbanism and climate, we are talking about not just the built environment, but also the natural ecosystems that the cities are sitting on, and the communities that are built on those places. Dense, and this is, I mean, everyone in the room knows this stuff, dense walkable neighborhoods that are transit-oriented reduce the need to drive, and that clearly is a major factor in greenhouse gas reduction. Transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gases in the United States. So even as our vehicle fleet transitions to EVs, it can't transition fast enough, and that's one of the reasons why we are really pushing this message of urbanism as a climate action. If we want to meet the 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario, EVs aren't going to get us there. And we just heard yesterday from the Rocky Mountain Institute, Ben Holland spoke to us. He said by 2030, we need to have 70 million EVs on the road in the US and a 20% reduction in how much we drive. So he was very clear. He said we need both. It can't just be EVs, it has to be both. So both is better. 2030 is approaching rapidly, and we know electric vehicles just aren't going to get us there. So we really need some urbanism as part of the solution. And we have to reduce our collective emissions by 80 to 90% below 1990 levels by 2050 in order to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. So some bummer news there. That correlates to 1/3 less vehicle miles traveled in order to reduce demand for energy to the levels that can be compensated by renewable sources as they come online. We can achieve these goals by rebuilding our communities around the principles of walkable urbanism, where most essential destinations are close enough to walk, bike, or take transit. Urbanism lends emission reductions beyond just transportation. It is a force multiplier. Urbanism alone can get us 3/4 of the way towards this emissions reduction, and the last quarter can be reached through transportation demand management strategies such as carbon taxes and congestion pricing. Okay, so creating places that are not auto-oriented sprawl is a key factor in reducing greenhouse gases, as we've said, and they have numerous well-known co-benefits that we talk about all the time in new urbanism. Walkable places create opportunities for healthier, more active lifestyles. They create opportunities for community and connection. They are economic engines with the power of agglomeration, creating economic clusters that drive innovation and growth. So avoiding auto-centric sprawl is also the key to preserving agricultural lands and natural areas. And again, my friends living in the trees, like, that's why I just could not relate to their choices. Avoiding auto-centric sprawl. So basically this aspect of urbanism cannot be understated. We need our natural places both for our mental health and the ecosystem services they provide. Nature bathing, a lot of doctors are prescribing that now for people for their mental health. We need those places to continue to exist. We can't pave them over. Our natural lands are also important ecosystems that protect human settlements from climate impacts, and they protect habitats of species, flora and fauna. Okay, and so finally, it's not just about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Urbanism is at the center of climate adaptation. We need to focus on urbanism because 55% of the world's population now live in urban areas, and this is a trend that will continue. And do we want this continued urbanization to sprawl out and pave over more and more of the planet? I remember in 2008, that was the tipping point where we reached the 50% threshold of 50% of the population on the planet living in urban areas. So that was 15 years ago. It is now continued on. I think, where are we at now? I think 70%? Oh no, by 2050 we'll be at 70%. So we're just ticking away at that, and we continue to be more and more urban. So in light of that, basically we need to focus on urban areas as places for adaptation. So not only do we need to have more urbanism to reduce emissions, but we need to focus our adaptation efforts in urban areas because that's where the people are living. Adaptations in urban areas are the key to a livable planet where people are not just fleeing from one disaster to another, like Laura was describing. We need to make sure our urban areas are resilient. So just being like repetitive here, urban areas are at the center of mitigation and adaptation. Back to basics here with this presentation. We need to keep working together, and I feel like our organization is making the effort, and I hope you all join us. So thank you.